All right, folks, welcome to another edition of XenTegra's Webinar Wednesday. And yes, it's not a mistake. We are doing 2 o'clock in the afternoon because we are accommodating a West Coast guest today. So thanks for joining me and thanks for the patience on the time change. And this year we got a great guest and topic. We're going to be talking about Nutanix and how Nutanix is enabling hyperconverged infrastructure HCI 2.0. And my name is Pete Downing. I'm the CMTO and host of XenTegra's webinar on Wednesday. And on the phone, I got a good panel of guests, but primarily today I'm going to be talking to Steven. So Steven, if you want to give yourself a quick introduction and a little background, we're going to be digging deeper later on, but just a quick intro and who you are.
Sure, thanks, Peter. Steve Kaplan, Vice President of Customer Success Finance at Nutanix. Better known on Twitter, though, as ROI Dude. And been in the industry a long time. Actually, I started and ran the first a Citrix channel partner that was named the first Citrix Partner of the Year way back when.
Yeah.
Sold that, and then a few years later started a VMware consultancy and became a premier partner and sold that. And I moved up to Lake Tahoe, and I have a team of analysts, business value analysts at Nutanix globally that I manage. We've always been work from home from the beginning, so this year's been nothing new for us. And very happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Also, I like to recognize other folks who help out with our partnerships. So Virginia, if you want to give yourself a quick intro really quick.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Virginia Sun-Dampier. I am the Nutanix channel rep based out of North Carolina. So I've been managing the XenTegra and Nutanix relationship this year, and we're seeing tremendous growth. So I'm very excited to be here and have you guys all here to be with us for this session today.
Cool, and thanks for jumping on today too. All right, next up we got Merritt. Merritt, can you give yourself a quick intro and a little shout out too?
Sure. So hey guys, Merritt Dombos. I am a systems engineer here at Nutanix. Been at the company about 3 years. Prior to working at the company, I was actually a Nutanix customer, so I can relate to everything that you guys may be seeing. But work directly with XenTegra quite a bit, so I get the pleasure, and they get the pleasure of talking to me all the time. But one thing I did want to say on this call before it gets kickstarted, we actually have a boot camp that XenTegra and Nutanix are running together. It is on Friday from 10 to 1 Eastern. So if you guys are interested after this call to get some hands-on with Nutanix, feel free to reach out to Pete from XenTegra and we can get you guys signed up.
Awesome. Thanks for jumping on today. Tony couldn't join us, but a little shout out. He's our channel SE, does a lot to help us as well. And then finally, Megan, if you want to give your quick intro, she's my partner in crime and helps keep me honest when we're doing Grubhub handouts.
Hey guys, Megan Hansen here. I've been with XenTegra for about 3.5 years, working closely with Pete for about 3 of those now. So I'm excited about this webinar. It's going to be a good one today.
All right, so we encourage question and answer. So in the GoToWebinar dialogue, there's a Q&A dialogue. Please throw questions in there. If we're talking about something that interests you, definitely ask a question. I'll keep an eye on it, and if we think we can shim it in, we will. And if we don't get to your question, don't worry. I try to reach out to every attendee who asks a question and to sync up personally. So definitely you'll hear from me. And our agenda is simple. We're going to be talking a lot about HCI 2.0 today. And where needed, we'll show some slides, but we're gonna have a fun conversation. I'm excited about this. But before we do, definitely check out events.xentegra.com. Yes, this Friday we have a revamped, I'll call it the revamped boot camp of Nutanix. Merritt and Harvey are gonna be doing it, and I'm excited. So definitely sign up. There's limited seats, and you get hands-on experience as well. So check that out. Also, we got a lot of other great events going on, so check out all the other cool events we got going on. Podcast.xentegra.com. Steven, you're actually a guest coming up, right? On a future one?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so Andy, our founder and CEO, loves to do podcasts. He's launching another series, and we're going to focus on HCI and Nutanix, and he's going to launch with a podcast with Steven as this first one. And then finally, webinars.xentegra.com. The good news is I'm launching a schedule for next year, but we have one more left next week with Brian Madden. Brian Madden from VMware is going to be joining us, and we're going to talk a year in review. And how the pandemic can't stop us. So we're gonna have a little fun with that. And yes, we do give out Grubhub credits, but please be patient with Megan. We have to ensure that you are who you say you are. And if you don't provide a business email, we ask for that. And if you're not going to give it to us, then unfortunately we don't hand out Grubhub credits. So we do require business emails. Today's giveaways, we got a lot of cool stuff. I'm going to be picking a lucky winner to get a LG Gram 17-inch ultra lightweight laptop. I got some other cool swag items here. We got a Yeti that I'll give out, the XenTegra hat. I'm going to give out some Nutanix shirts, so plural. So I'll pick out a bunch of people and send out some shirts, and then I'm going to do some surprise swag as well. So watch your mail, and I'll be announcing the winner of the laptop in the next couple of weeks. Definitely check out bracco.xentegra.com. If we have time, I will highlight some of the details here, but go and check it out. And one of those things you might want to do is take advantage of one of our micro assessments, which will tell you, hey, you need Nutanix. All right, so let's have some fun. I'm going to do some polling because I love data, as does Steven. And we are going to have fun and poll you guys. So here's my first question, just to get everybody warmed up. I am a Nutanix customer, so my enterprise is a Nutanix customer. So answer what best fits you. Again, no one can see your information. No one can tell that you're answering the questions. It's all anonymous. So don't worry. If you are on the web client, you may need to full screen it to see the poll, just as an FYI. So we'll give this a couple seconds. I like to get at least 60% or higher. And we'll give this a couple more seconds, going once, twice, and last call for clicks. All right, so we got a lot of, just sharing out the poll, we got a lot of no customers on this call, Steven. So we got our work cut out for us today. And we got a lot of happy customers, hopefully, and we got a lot of folks evaluating it. So hopefully your evals are going well. If you have any questions, definitely reach out. XenTegra can help definitely make sure your eval goes smoothly. All right, let's talk about cost. Cost is a big factor when considering moving to the cloud. And this may sound like a loaded question, but it's again to get you guys warmed up for some of the harder ones I'm going to ask in a second. But we are going to talk a lot about ROI because Steven is the ROI dude, and we'll have a little fun with that and highlight where you can save money by using HCI 2.0. So we'll give this a couple more seconds and going once and twice, and last call for clicks. All right, and we kind of knew the answer to this one, Steven. Yes, cost is a big factor. So we'll talk a lot about this. I can't wait. All right, next question. My enterprise currently uses an HCI platform today. And again, yeah, it's kind of an offshoot of the first question. And there's only so many people I can put in this poll, but just curiosity of like, if you're using one of the common ones I see out there, there's a few others that we see out there, but just answer the one that best fits your needs. And if you are evaluating it, I'd love to reach out and find out who you're evaluating. But again, it only lets me 5 answers, which gets a little annoying. All right, going once, twice, and last call for clicks. And if you say you don't see a need, we're going to try to change that view. So there's a lot of you that don't see a need for Hyperconverged, and we're gonna talk about where that's evolving in 2021. All right, let's talk about infrastructure as a service, because this plays into the hybrid cloud story. So are you evaluating an infrastructure as a service today? So compute. So are you doing like Azure, AWS, GCP, other could be like a Equinix, it could be a Rackspace, it could be an IBM cloud. Pick your choice that fits you best. And I always find this poll interesting because 3 years ago it was AWS. It was the other way around. So all right, last call for clicks, going once, twice, and final call. All right, so a lot of you doing Azure. I got a follow-up question on that in a little bit. A lot of you still considering it, so it'd be interesting to see how that's playing into your whole remote work strategy with this whole pandemic. So we'll see, we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, 2 more. My enterprise primarily uses the following hypervisor platform. So pick the one you primarily use. I mean, you could use multiple, I get it, but pick your primary one. And we could probably take a guess of which one's going to be the primary. And we asked this for, again, a reason. This plays into the ROI TCO conversation a little bit later we'll have. So going once, twice, and last call for clicks. All right, so we could probably guess the response. Even we got VMware as the king of the hill right now, but it'll be interesting to see what people think once we get done talking about Nutanix. All right, let's talk about the final question. More just an anecdote here. What is your primary end user compute product today that you use? So are you primarily a Citrix shop? Are you a VMware shop? Are you Microsoft or other or none? So pick your choice that fits you best. And we ask this because it does play into the conversation, right? How does Hyperconverged enhance your EUC, but also where does Nutanix add value and save you money? So that's a big conversation, as part of the whole theme today. All right, last call for clicks, going once, twice, and final call. So we could, again, it's refreshing to see. We have 185 people, 63% voted. So we got a pretty good snippet of data here, but 51% of you say, hey, I'm a Citrix shop, and the rest of you are spread out. A lot of Microsoft RDS shop people here too as well. I'm pretty impressive. So, all right, so good data snippets. Thank you for taking the polls. If you're not following Nutanix, XenTegra, hey, Steven as well, he puts up a lot of great articles. Definitely do follow him on Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. Follow both companies. We put a lot of good information up. Please do. Also, go over to our LinkedIn pages and like them for us. I'm trying to get to 2,000 this year, so work with me. All right, so without further ado, we're gonna talk about Nutanix, HCI, and have a little fun. And Steve, just in case, I'm gonna give you controls. If you want to share your screen, you can. You don't have to, but when you're ready, you'll have the ability to do so. All right, so Steven, thanks for joining me today. How are you doing? And from your perspective, how was Nutanix's year so far?
Well, thanks again, Pete, and thanks everybody for listening in. From my perspective, it's been going great. Last quarter results are out, and they're very good. And, just to give you a perspective, when I joined Nutanix, it was, the year after XenTegra started, I guess, and I was evaluating for a long time, for about a year, and I was working for a multi-billion-dollar channel partner that bought my company, my last company, which was a VMware consultancy. And a friend of mine was the one who told me about Nutanix, and I was very intrigued with the technology, and I thought, how amazing this looked like. But then I was thinking, well, how often does a 50-person startup have a prayer against a little handful of global multi-billion-dollar giants that completely dominate not just the data center, but also the channel partner industry, certainly back in those days. So I was watching them and so on. But what really was the turning point for me is working at this large partner with a CIO that I knew. I actually sold her Nutanix. And it was kind of funny because it's a very large partner. The Chicago office where they're located, they didn't want to install it. They just wanted to do ENC. So I had to go to the Dallas office where I knew the people really well, and I convinced them to install this, new Nutanix system. And they didn't know what they're doing, and they installed it. It worked fine, and the customer loved it. And I'm just thinking, man, this thing is just so easy to sell, so easy to install. I guess I got to go do it. And, so I gave up my dreams of a cushy consulting career and went back to work 70 hours a week at a startup at that time. And but I was just so excited about it. But as excited as I was back then, I'm a lot more excited today, with all the new offerings. And as I mentioned, my team of business value analysts, we help customers evaluate disruptive technologies like public cloud and private cloud, and of course Nutanix, and then within Nutanix, the different types of technologies. And two of my very favorites are Nutanix Era, which I believe is going to revolutionize database management the same way HCI revolutionized storage. I can basically guarantee a savings of 50% or more from the analyses we've done. And then Xi Leap, which is Nutanix hosted DR solution. And, public cloud, we do obviously tons and tons of analyses. And where public cloud makes sense from an economic standpoint is elastic workloads, non-predictable workloads. And there's nothing more non-predictable than DR. And so the economics of it are actually quite compelling, you know, instead of having to have your own DR site and your own equipment and manage it all and set it up. So those are my two favorites, and obviously Nutanix clusters as well, which I'm sure we'll be talking about.
Cool. So yeah, we've been locked in our houses for a while. You know, any hobbies you want to speak of since you've been locked up and can't travel anymore like me?
Yeah, well, you know, I live up in Lake Tahoe. That's where I moved to and visit my cushy consulting career. So I live right by Heavenly. And last year we had a dry year for snow. Finally, March 14th, got just dumped on, you know, later in the day. Biggest storm by far. And then they announced March 15th the resort was closed due to pandemic. So, what? You know, it's like a Saturday on top of it. So I ran down to the local ski shop and rented some snowshoes and some I had poles, and I snowboard primarily. And got the snowshoes, got a backpack, strapped my snowboard to it, hiked all the way up to the top of the mountain, and boarded down. And it was just such an amazing experience. I did it several more times. And this year I bought what's called a split board. It's a snowboard that splits into two, and you turn them around and become skis, basically. So hiking up the mountain, get to the top, and then put them back into snowboard. So that's my new sport that, thanks to COVID, that I love.
Nice. That sounds fun. Cool. So you joined Nutanix. You started their America's Channel program, and how did you end up becoming, you know, doing ROIs and becoming the ROI dude, right?
Well, you know, going back to my channel partner days, for my Citrix business, you know, I have an MBA, so I like all those kinds of metrics, as I'm sure you do as well. But back in those days, ROI and TCO actually were not very much done in the IT industry. It's fairly unusual. And when Citrix WinFrame came out around 2005, if I recall correctly, you know, we were blown away. And man, this stuff is so cool. You don't even need servers in your remote offices. In fact, you don't even really need to run the functionality of a PC. This was even before Windows terminals. And so I started doing ROIs for customers to show them the value of it. And my team started doing it too. And like, I don't know, 4 years later, Mark Templeton, the longtime CEO of Citrix, was going to be in San Francisco. Our company was headquartered in the East Bay, little tiny corner of the Northeast Bay area. And he asked to have breakfast with me, and I met with him, and he said, "How are you guys selling so much Citrix?" And, you know, such a tiny little outpost. And I said, "Oh, we use ROI." So I helped Citrix develop some of their first tools, and worked with Gartner as well. And throughout my whole career, I've just been promoting it. And when I joined Nutanix, they actually, because I came from a channel background, they wanted me to start up our channels program for the Americas. And I tried to tell them, you know, I don't know anything about channels from the manufacturing side. They said, that's okay. Nutanix, we do new things. We like new people. And I actually do think it worked out well for Nutanix because of my connections in the industry and so on. But after a couple of years, former clients of mine started, they'd see my LinkedIn title change, and they'd call me up and say, you know, what's a Nutanix? And so I ended up starting doing TCOs for these folks and ROIs, and eventually my boss, the president, said, you know, you want to run channels, or you want to go do this ROI stuff? So I want to do the ROI stuff. So that's how it happened. First it was just me, and then the team has just grown and grown over the years.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's fun. I actually enjoy running numbers and doing ROI, TCO. I think it's a big piece of the conversation, and I always joke with folks when they're looking at a solution like Nutanix or Citrix Cloud with Nutanix. I say, hey, don't forget about the most important asset, yourself, and they always forget about the soft costs of IT. And so that's something that I always talk about when we're talking about cloud, because everybody thinks, oh, when you move to cloud, it's just about the power, the servers, they forget that there's also the human element, there's the time over the weekends, and et cetera. So it's interesting to get into ROI, TCO. Cool. So let's dive in. So, you've launched, you and I have had great conversation over the last few weeks, but you're very passionate about HCI 2.0. So can you kind of explain to the audience what is HCI 2.0, and how do you think that's going to impact Nutanix in 2021?
Yeah, certainly. Hey, just one sec. I just wanted to comment on your cost of you comment, because I think that is really important.
Yep.
And again, throughout my 25 years of doing these analyses now, a lot of times we'll say, well, if we save staff, that doesn't count. They're just going to spend time at the office school or whatever. And for most organizations, the cost of their employees is their number one at cost, or very close to that. And if we're able through efficiencies to save staff time, I consider that a management issue and not a financial one. And most IT organizations are vastly understaffed. They can't get to all the things they want to do. So we're going to free up that time, and then it becomes a management issue. But I do think, and when we do an analysis, we typically we break that apart. We break out CapEx and OpEx and break out admin still separately from that, just so that it becomes very clear. But I think it's a very crucial metric and something that should always be addressed. In terms of HCI 2.0, moving from hyperconverged infrastructure to hybrid cloud infrastructure. I'm the one who called it 2.0. I don't think anybody else at Nutanix does that. But really, so what we did with Nutanix Clusters is we took our HCI software called Nutanix ALS, and over a number of years, figured out how to port it to public cloud to run in bare metal instances. Like within Amazon's case, instead of EC2, you're running bare metal instances of Nutanix. And it works spectacularly well because you can keep your same operating models on-prem and your same security policies and your same IT governance. You can use the same Nutanix Prism management pane to manage both environments, same tool sets. So you're able, just to give you a quick story, I was speaking with one of the customers that followed me to Nutanix, the CIO. He had hired a new head of enterprise for infrastructure and security and cloud. And he had a strong public cloud background, cloud native background. In fact, he holds patents for semiconductor stuff running in public cloud. And I doubt that he wanted to meet with me. I think the CIO made him because he gave me a 20-minute call. And at the beginning of the call, he was pretty vocal that he preferred cloud native. That was his thing. But by the end of 20 minutes, he made the comments, we want a clusters POC now, and we want to partner with you on this. And the reason why is we have found, my team found this actually, that clusters saves you money versus public cloud native because of the inefficiencies that are involved in public cloud. Clusters kind of mitigates that. I could talk about that later if we have time. But that's how I caught the CIO's attention. But what caught this guy's attention was the fact that his mandate or his desire was to move to public cloud, and they're a county, so they're unionized, and they just can't tell their staff, hey, you got to go get trained in public cloud. And even if they could, then they'd have to backfill them and augment them in order to do public cloud. So he knew it was going to be a long journey, and when he realized with clusters that he could, vastly speed up this migration because of using the same staff, their same skill sets, again, no new operating models or tools, and he could get there really fast. That's what really caught attention. He said, this is something we want to do. And we've had similar experiences. I think my boss, who, as far as I know, has never been in sales, he's already closed like 6 to 10 clusters POCs.
So, if you kind of like highlight, if you're on an elevator, how do you highlight and summarize clusters? Like, if someone said, hey, what's Nutanix clusters? How do you answer them?
Well, I would answer Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure running in public cloud.
Okay.
But another way to look at it is abstracting the public cloud. Our industry overall doesn't like cul-de-sacs. If you go anything that's kind of closed off eventually gets pressure. Make sure I'm muted still here. Okay. So anything gets pressure to open up. And I believe we're going to see the same thing with public cloud. Because, if you go to a specific cloud, you learn their tool sets, you write through their APIs. What happens if they compete with you, or if they miss their SLAs, or they raise their prices that really negatively impact you? You can't easily move. Well, what we do is we kind of abstract the public cloud layer and let you move between public clouds, let you move back on-prem, from on-prem to public cloud. So it's your same on-premises experience running in public cloud, managing the whole thing, the same. And just again, to touch a little bit what I said earlier in terms of lowering cost, the analogy I like to give is if you rent a U-Haul, they're going to charge you by the day or by the week, whatever it is, and they don't care if you put a suitcase in that or if you put a big boat in it. You still get charged the same. And that's kind of how public cloud is. You pay for these instances in terms of vCPU and memory. And if your VM does it exactly right, you got a little bit of resources left over, and those and they go to waste. But with Nutanix clusters, since we're running on bare metal, we're capturing those. Now, on an individual VM basis, it doesn't really matter. But when you start aggregating over a lot of VMs, it can actually be a lot of money. And then you talk about things like CPU over subscription limitations in public cloud, and storage limitations, and no native like dedupe and so on, compression, and the inability to spin down VMs when they're not being used. You put these all together, and the cost tends to be quite significant running on clusters. You save a lot of money, typically over public cloud. And in my opinion, that's not the main reason to go to Nutanix. It's icing on the cake. The cake is being able to move fast to public cloud and use the same operating model as both on-prem and public cloud. And increasingly we're getting even customers that don't want any more on-prem. They want to be just in public cloud. They know it's more expensive, but they don't care. And so for those, it's still great. Again, they get a lot of the capabilities that clusters brings them, and they lower the public cloud cost.
Cool. So let's kind of jump into kind of take this story and twine it in. We'll just generalize and say end user compute. So how does Nutanix take a solution, a strategy like end user computing with Citrix or even VMware and lower the cost from your perspective and your experience over the years?
All right, let me see if I can show my screen here on this. You seeing this?
Yep. Perfect. Yep.
Awesome. So this is ROI Dude, my even geekier alter ego. ROI Dude gives out helpful tips throughout the chapters of my book, and posing with, again, Mark Templeton, the longtime Citrix CEO, graciously wrote the foreword to my book. And I wrote an article September this year, 10 Reasons Why Nutanix is the best platform for Citrix. It actually gained a lot of traction out there. In fact, recently, the Korean Citrix team saw it and asked me to keynote for their Korea virtual conference, so it's pretty cool. This is a slide I like to use to show kind of legacy SAN complexity. In fact, in my book, I have a whole chapter devoted to why the SAN-based data center model is broken. I give a lot of examples that support that assertion. This is my favorite. Mustafa Kali authored the book Storage Design and Implementation in vSphere 6, and it's an excellent book. But he bragged on Twitter that he fit all 1,242 pages into one volume. I mean, 1,242 pages, this is a big, heavy book. Pre-pandemic, when I used to travel, I would bring it as a prop, would take up over a fourth of my suitcase. I had a TS agent stop and search my suitcase once because he didn't believe me when I told him my big object is a book. Now, in comparison, the Nutanix equivalent to storage design and implementation, vSphere, because just about half of our overall customers still run vSphere, about a third of our Citrix customers, is a 22-page tech note. So the 1,220-page delta represents not all the complexity of SAN-based architecture, but also all the costs inevitably associated with that complexity. Also, an inflexibility, inability for IT to rapidly deliver the innovative new services and offerings that the business is demanding for its customers. And so looking at the challenge of SAN from a financial perspective, let's say you're getting ready to buy a SAN. I don't know why anybody would buy a new SAN array in today's environment, but let's say for whatever reason you are, for your VDI environment, you have to guess 5 years down the road what kind of users you're going to be, how many users you're going to have, what type of applications they'll be running, what type of OS requirements they'll have in those days. Then you have to buy a SAN with enough excess capacity, as shown by this chart, in terms of drive-based space, storage controller size, that you can meet those resource demands 5 years down the road when your SAN is going to hit end of life. But what happening is you're paying for that capacity up front, and then the whole thing starts depreciating the first day you put it in. So it becomes really old technology by the time you make it 5 years, if you make it 5 years. If you don't, then you face this forklift upgrade that's very expensive and complex and time consuming. And you're going to have it anyway, face it anyway at the end of 5 years, but at least you want to wait until then. And so what Nutanix does is completely turns this model on the head, which is really important for VDI because everybody wants to start out small, or should want to start out small, in my opinion, if they haven't ever done it before. So you can start out with as few as 3 nodes, and then as you add nodes to your environment, you're scaling your resources linearly. There's no SAN, there's no central storage and storage controllers. And so, the user experience is the same whether it's 3 nodes or 300 nodes or 3,000 nodes. With the SAN, as the storage controllers start filling up prior to the refresh, you start getting storage slowdowns, inconsistent user experience. And all my Citrix books, I co-authored 5 Citrix books over the years. I talk about how it's better to have 100% mediocre experience for your users than a 95% excellent and 5% mediocre, because users just hate inconsistency. So you get this linear performance, never have to worry about a forklift upgrade. If you just decide to replace your 5-year-old Nutanix nodes, you can actually just do it in minutes, and you can do it with far fewer nodes because of Moore's Law. Technology moves on, and as you start expanding your VDI environment, your Nutanix footprint, you're bringing the latest and greatest technology in terms of capacity and performance. And what that means is that the number of users per node is continuing to increase. And so you model this out over 5 years. In addition to the reduced CapEx, you're not paying for the rack space, power, and cooling of all that capacity. You're eliminating every single storage task. There's no LUN carving, there's no switch zoning because there's no storage fabric, there's no volumes expansion, there's no RAID group management. It all those go away. So you model this all together, and it becomes a really compelling financial story over a number of years versus legacy SAN, not to mention, again, de-risking because no forklift upgrade. So this is probably what attracted me to Nutanix most of all, is understanding, because VDI is, user computing has always been close to my heart for so many years, and understanding how, back in those days before Nutanix, VDI was pretty hard. I think the number of VDI stalls or failures was vastly higher than the number of successes. Nutanix makes it so simple. And on top of all that, we have, what we call our one-click upgrades, the ability with a single click to upgrade your nodes wherever they are around the world, so that they're running the latest and greatest OS. And we're also upgrading the underlying firmware and hypervisor, whatever that hypervisor is. And so what that means, though, is that even your nodes that are years old are running faster, more capability, more users per VM, and you add this to everything else, and it makes still more of a compelling story. And by the way, these are just some tweets from customers who like the life cycle management upgrades, the one-click upgrades. My favorite is the bottom from Matt Day, who is CIO in Australia, and he tweeted, "I'm 9,000 miles away from my Nutanix cluster and 38,000 feet in the air. I'm using United Wi-Fi in the middle of the day. I upgraded our Nutanix production environment." And that's not necessarily best practices, but the upgrade process is just so easy, so bulletproof, that customers do it all the time. Sometimes they brag about it on social media.
Well, that's awesome. It's funny. I know probably half the names on those slides. So it's kind of cool. So aside from kind of ROI and TCO, I'll attest to one other hidden attribute of putting EUC on Nutanix is user experience as well. We can't forget about the user experience, and so if you couple the cost savings with the user experience, you're going to get a sound solution. And I live by the mantra: if your end users aren't happy, guess what? Your project fails. So I really believe that user experience matters. So since we're on the topic of kind of EUC ROI, I got a great question from the audience. I'm curious to see how you answer, how you would answer this, because you're the ROI dude. So I'll paraphrase here. I have heard customers sometimes have a preconceived notion that Nutanix is expensive. Is that a fair statement? And if not, what would you say to change their mind? So if a customer comes to you and says, hey, Steven, Nutanix is expensive, how do you respond?
I respond by, what does expensive mean? Is I don't know, am I dating myself? Is a Ford Pinto, or is a Tesla more expensive than a Ford Pinto? Yeah, it is. But what are you trying to accomplish as an organization? And in fact, even way back when I was working for the company that bought my last channel partner business, and we were selling both VMware and Citrix, the biggest question we would get back then is, should we go with Citrix or VMware? And my response would be, that's the wrong question. The wrong question. The question should be, what are you trying to accomplish as an organization with your end user computing strategy, whatever that is, and what type of savings, if you achieve it, are you likely to realize? Just sorry for the divergence, but just real quickly, we did an ROI analysis earlier this year for a healthcare organization, small, 1,100 concurrent users, but growing very rapidly. And we did this ROI analysis showing them their savings from virtualizing their physical desktops on Citrix on Nutanix. And projected conservative savings over 5 years, 2.4 million. Pretty impressive. But what that doesn't count is the user savings, and especially in their case, clinical workers and especially physicians. And physicians we zeroed in on. We found that through reducing their login times and eliminating round-trip walking to dedicated billing stations, CPO stations they're called, and dictation stations and so on, we save the average physician enough time to see an extra patient a day. And so you take the revenue of that extra patient, multiply by all the physicians by all the days over 5 years, and it came to 120 million on top of the 2.4 million. So, are you going to risk all of that by buying an HCI solution that clearly is not as good as the best, and the best is Nutanix? So that's my question to people. Let's look at the cost in context of what you're trying to achieve. And let's look at like you mentioned, the administrative savings alone, because Nutanix is so simple, the likelihood of success of the initiative, all those factors go in, instead of just looking up front, well, Pinto's cheaper than Tesla, so that's the car for me.
Yeah, and someone actually indirectly highlighted too, and you highlighted on one of your slides, the pay-as-you-grow model plays very nicely too. So you don't have to go all in, right? So
Right.
That's the great thing about Nutanix is, and arguably they were one of the first folks to kind of revolutionize the term of clustering, right? In my book, and you probably remember Sunil Poti, right? Back in that.
Oh, yes,
so
sure.
I reported to Sunil when I worked in the NetScaler group as a product manager, and helped get a product called CloudBridge off the ground. And back in the day, they talked about clustering of NetScaler, and then he joined Nutanix, and ironically, here you guys are talking about pay-as-you-grow and clustering as well. So someone indirectly highlighted that. All right, so let's talk about a follow-up question on this, and I think you can answer this pretty quickly. So where do you think the biggest return on investment is with Nutanix? So in your mind, is it the storage? Is it the scalability, the performance? If you're going to summarize in a one sentence or less, what would you say the biggest ROI savings is?
Well, from a VDI perspective, or
yeah,
overall?
let's keep it VDI since the theme is the first question.
I would say the biggest one is going to be the initiative that works. I've just seen too many examples over the years of the EUC failing, which a very large organization we're working with right now, they just had that for a bank, for their traders. They put in a specific solution, and it's miserable. Any of these traders are massively important and productive, and they're failing, they're going down. So that to me is always the biggest ROI, does project success and likelihood of project success. Beyond all that, if we're comparing it to a SAN-based architecture, scalability for sure.
Okay.
Because with the SAN, like I mentioned, the example I mentioned earlier, the first client who called me when I went to Nutanix was Fairway Mortgage. The CIO there, Bob Orcus, had joined about the year previously, and they had they had bought a vBlock the year before, and for those of you who don't know what vBlock is, it was the granddaddy of converged infrastructure.
Yep.
Very popular, yeah. But they're growing so fast. They're small in those days, but they're growing so fast that they filled up the vBlock in just a year. And so their choice is: do we buy a whole new vBlock, do this forklift upgrade, which looks really bad, because you just paid all this money the year before, or do you buy a second vBlock, and then you got to deal with all the crazy management of both environments? And so Bob asked me when I told him about Nutanix, said, hey, can you do a TCO comparing buying that second vBlock versus buying Nutanix, wasn't even called Hyperconverged infrastructure then, the Nutanix technology. And that's what we did, and we showed them, over 5 years, looking, in those days, we looked at the cost of their hardware, their software, their planned expansion for both scenarios because they're growing so fast. We looked at rack space, power cooling. We took a really, really conservative approach to administrative savings because he had a lean staff. And we didn't even look at business outcomes at all, something that figures prominently in our analyses today. But the savings were around $900,000 over 5 years. They're impressive enough that Bob brought in Nutanix for some of his, for his Citrix use case. And Nutanix was very young and small in those days. Obviously, he took a risk. Today, Fairway is one of the top 3 largest private mortgage companies in the country. They $40 billion in loan originations last year. They run all of their applications, DR and production, on hundreds of Nutanix nodes. Bob has retired years ago, but the new CIO, Randy Allen, at our customer conference .next in September, he made the statement that here's the real ROI. He said that Nutanix has been integral to enabling our rapid growth. I mean, incredible growth. And to me, that is the absolute key. That they wouldn't have been able to grow into the juggernaut they become. I don't think, or at least the CIO credits Nutanix as the integral part of that.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's shift some gears here and let's talk about your book. I have it up on the screen. So the good news is everybody who attends today, Stephen, is it fair to say I'm allowed to share a copy of this?
Yes, absolutely.
And so, yeah, give us a little synopsis on your book, The ROI Story, and then curious, I know you've known Mark a long time. What made him write your foreword?
Well, I guess going back to Mark, when I had my first Citrix channel partner business, this was before our breakfast, in fact, I did a comic book called, our company's called Rhino, R-Y-N-O, so it's called Rhino Man and the Metaframe Adventure. I always liked comic books, and I sent it to Mark, and he was out of the office, and his admin opened his mail, and when he came back, she said, oh, now I finally understand what we do. So that's how I first kind of struck up this relationship with Mark, especially after our breakfast in San Francisco. And as I mentioned, over the years, I've co-authored 5 books on Citrix, 3 on VMware, but using very senior technical architects. My background's all business. And all my co-authors told me, you wrote the easy parts, which is true, at least from my perspective. Well, last year, I decided to do my first solo book, The ROI Story, a guide for IT leaders. And it's really geared toward helping IT professionals use a financial analysis framework, not only for evaluating disruptive technologies, but for the ones that make sense, then how do you build a compelling business justification around them in order to kind of gain organizational consensus in order to get the funding you need to bring that technology in-house and deploy it. And the reason I wrote the book is because I just had so many IT folks over the years tell me different technologies, I like this makes sense. I don't know how to make it happen. And decision makers are comfortable with their status quo environment or, whatever the reason. And so years of accumulated knowledge, and then my team as well really contributed a lot to this, of ideas and strategies. And so how do you, one, how do you evaluate that disruptive technology accurately? 2, if it makes sense, how do you get the money to bring it internally?
Nice. And so, do you have any new books kind of in your future? Are you working on a next book?
Just conceptually.
Yep.
At the end of this book, I talk about it, that the ROI story is really written from the perspective of IT as cost center. And what we're seeing slowly, very slowly happen is a transformation to IT as innovation center. And it is slow. You know, a lot of people that say, oh, you know, we view IT as an innovation center, but then they go out and issue an RFP for their next project, which to me is not really, it makes sense if you're looking at an innovation center. And so as that happens, as more and more organizations, you know, embrace, for example, hybrid cloud as a platform for enabling incredible innovation, you're going to need new tools, new metrics on how you measure that. Traditional ROI won't cut that anymore. And so that's what my team is in process of doing now as we work with our customers, is learning. And a lot of times we're learning from our customers, you know, what makes sense, how do you measure this, is a cost per share, what are the metrics we should be looking at? And so that'll be the next book, the ROI of IT as Innovation Center.
Nice. I'd love to give input if you're ever willing. I'm a data guy, so you know, I think that's what makes kind of you and I unique, is we look at data, but we take our expertise as well and apply it. And you know, so that's, you know, I kind of approach marketing and technology a little differently. But all right, so let's talk
Peter,
about challenges.
I'd love to get your input, by the way.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So let's talk about challenges. So what challenges, you know, have you faced in your analysis of financial, you know, analysis in IT? You know, what's some of the challenges that you see typically?
One of the big ones is people simply not knowing their cost, especially, again, if we're comparing a SAN-based legacy environment. And I'm not talking about costs like administrative costs. Not very many people know that at all. But just what are the costs of their SAN? In fact, how many SANs do they even have? What's the cost of sending people to training each year, and for all these different models, and as new upgrades or new models come out and so on, the cost of the switch fabric and upgrading that. And when you're doing an analysis, if you try and wait to zero down on every single cost, it'll probably never happen, right? That analysis is never going to finish. And the idea of analysis is really to give an organization an order of magnitude comfort in the different scenarios being evaluated, so they can make the best decision for the organization, whatever that happens to be. And so what we'll do if we run up, let's say, for example, a customer's running a SAN and it's going to hit end of life in 2 years, and they don't know what the cost is going to be to upgrade that. Well, we'll say, we have a lot of experience here. So, you know, for that type of SAN, we typically see prices range between $700,000 and $1 million. You're kind of on the heavy usage side. How about if we use $900,000 as a placeholder, and then if that changes, you know, it's just a mouse click. We'll go back and make the change. And so that's the way we get past this lack of knowledge and are able to actually finish the analysis and get the numbers, get the results in the hands of the decision makers. The other thing, and this is why I call the book the ROI Story, is that oftentimes even compelling numbers are not enough to galvanize IT decision makers to move forward with disruptive technology. An example I like to talk about, I mentioned in my book, is going all the way back to my VMware days. For XenTegra Healthcare, a large healthcare organization, the CIO had told me, Steve, we have a tiny VMware environment, but we can't get any money to expand it. We get $15,000 to $20,000 at a time, not enough to make a dent. And so we did this ROI analysis that showed compelling numbers, but what sold it is when Suzanne and I presented to the senior management board, what we emphasized was the fact that this big company is running on a backup generator, and they're headquartered in Dallas, and they needed their air conditioning was a mess, needed like $1 million overhaul. And with the hot Dallas summer months approaching and ever increasing demand for more servers, they still likely suffer from prolonged downtime at some point, or at least there's a good risk of it. And I think that's what galvanized decision makers. Suzanne basically got approval on the spot for the millions of dollars she needed to virtualize her entire data center.
Wow. So I guess we're coming to the end here, and I'll ask kind of one final question. So, what does it take to put together a compelling financial analysis? So not everybody has you or I. So what's your biggest recommendation when they're trying to put together a financial analysis?
It's common sense, but the most important thing is understanding biases, both what we call confirmation and status quo. I mean, let me give you an example. When I started my VMware consultancy in early 2005, the biggest objection we would get from IT professionals is, you will never put my production server into a virtual machine. And we laugh about that today, right? And yet, Gartner, who's in the business of projecting IT trends, years ago, back in March of 2017, retired their Magic Quadrant for virtualization because they saw what was happening with virtualization in the public cloud space, that all the public cloud providers and hybrid cloud leaders, all the public cloud leaders offer, we support legacy commercial hypervisors, but for own customers, we offer these native Linux-based hypervisors with no separate management tier, no certifications, scalable, resilient. So use an ROI analysis to shed a spotlight on status quo bias, on confirmation bias, again, so that the best results get up to the decision makers that can make the right decisions. And if you're evaluating disruptive technology, a lot of times that will require bringing in an expert from the manufacturer, from a channel partner who really knows it well, somebody who understands it, because there are a lot of nuances. For example, with hyperconverged infrastructure, even a lot of people still don't understand it. To this day, we get questions like, what's your cost per gigabyte or per terabyte? Which is great if you're going to buy a SAN, but it makes no sense in a hyperconverged world. So really important to do both. Got to have that financial acumen and got to really understand the disruptive technology in order to put together an accurate financial analysis that will have good results and also hopefully lead to deployment of the technology if it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and you're missing one other key thing, a good partner too, right?
No question.
Yeah,
absolutely. My roots, I'm a massive believer in great channel partners like XenTegra.
Thank you. All right, so let's come to a close, and I'm gonna ping you one more time before we get off. Any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience? But before we do, quick shout out to Merritt and Harvey, who's on the call. Shout out to Harvey. They're going to be doing an online Nutanix tech workshop on Friday, so definitely check it out. You get your hands dirty. Spots are limited. We got 30 seats. All right, and if you're a partner or a non-IT shop, please, we're going to reserve it for potential customers. Now, also at the bottom of this page, you'll notice there's a link here. Click on that. If you want to dig deeper into Nutanix and get an eval, click on that link, fill out the form, and we can help you get get deeper into Nutanix. So just a little shout out there. And I got all my little slides up here just in case. If you have any final questions, please put them in the dialogue. Again, if we can't answer your question, I follow up. And that's one of the things I try to do as the host of the show. Again, bronco.XenTegra.com. Yes, we're giving away a Ford Bronco next year. Sorry, Steven, you can't win it, but maybe we could work out a deal maybe. But bronco.XenTegra.com. Reason why I'm telling you about that is one of the options is doing what's called a micro assessment, and I definitely recommend doing that. The reason why is it's free, and you get a lot of good anecdotes to why you need to consider, Nutanix and other great technologies. Also, hey, are you hiring? Check out staffing.XenTegra.com. We have a full staffing division. Get us introduced to your HR department. We can help you find great hires, not because, we're a staffing org, but because we have great networks. That's one of the other benefits of being in this industry for so long. So some just calls to action. You sat here, you heard a lot of great information, rewatch the recording, but if you want to dig deeper, reach out to XenTegra and Nutanix, either or, and definitely reach out and say, hey, I want to check this out and dig deeper. So again, final call for questions. And as we're waiting for final questions, Steven, any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience before they exit out today and enjoy their Wednesday?
Just, thank you for listening to this. ROI is typically often not a topic of great interest, and I'm amazed at all the attendees and very much appreciated. Thanks, Pete and XenTegra. If you have, we'll get you a copy of my book. It's a great starting point. Please reach out to XenTegra or to us directly if you want. I'm ROI Dude on Twitter, cap@nutanix.com, and very happy to work with XenTegra and help you with a customized analysis that is good for boards and CFOs.
Awesome, and thanks for joining me today, Steven. I look forward, maybe next year I'll get you on and we can highlight maybe the precursor to your new book or we can have a little more fun talking about financials and ROI and TCO. It's a little bit of passion of mine as well. And just final shout out question. Someone asked, is this the last webinar of 2020? No, it's not. We got one more next week with VMware and Brian Madden. You want to check that out. Go to webinars.XenTegra.com. And, you know, again, no cap because it's a webinar, but yeah, definitely join us. Again, check out that Nutanix workshop. Seats are limited there. But yeah, if you have any questions, please reach out. And with that, I'm going to say, hey, everybody have a great rest of their Wednesdays. Thank you for joining Stephen and I today. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. And as I always say, see you all on the flip side and have a great Wednesday.